that Sale-a-Bration catalog. All right, my friends, so it is Friday, Facebook Live. Are you ready to stamp? I have two projects for you today. I'm going to show you a third, and they all are focused around that shaded summer stamp set and that wonderful die set that you can earn during Sale-a-Bration. This Summer Shadows dies. Remember, this is one of the items that Stampin' Up is forecasting will be depleted. That's why I'm focusing on it this week rather than waiting later during Sale-a-Bration. If you like it, you will want to add it to your list right away. So shaded summer, I'm going to put these to the side and I will show you today's projects. So here's our first card. Here's a second card, and as I said, stick with me. I'm going to show you another project that we're not going to create today, but I am going to share with you what else can be done with the beautiful stamp set and die set from Sale-a-Bration. So I'm going to start off with this card right here, and this card features the stamp from the stamp set Shaded Summer. I took this stamp right here, I inked up, I took the dies that is included in the Summer Shadows dies, and I die cut that entire spray of flowers. And I'm going to walk you through creating this sweet card. It's a thank you card, and it actually requires minimum supplies. Skill level wise, this is probably intermediate. You're just going to need to gather your supplies and cut down your papers. So let's get started. I'll tell you what we're using. So to start with, we will be using a card base of crumb cake that is cut to 5.5 by 8.5. I already pressed in or scored a fold line right here at 4 1/4. I'm going to take my bone folder, and this is one of the gifts that my team gets, a Stamperista bone folder. I think it was a Christmas gift last year. So team members get lots of different gifts, rewards, perks. There's my card base. The next thing we are going to need is a layer of Old Olive. Now, Old Olive used to be my favorite green when I first started Stampin' Up almost 20 years ago. I just love the color of it. This card stock measures 4 1/4 by 3 1/4. We are going to be layering it beneath basic white that measures 4 by 3. This is what we're going to be stamping on and what we're going to arrange our focal points on. I have a little tiny piece of, looks like paneling paper. This is from the, let's see, my paper pack. I don't want to tell you the wrong name. This is the In Good Taste Designer Series paper. It's a very small snippet, measures 4 inches by 3/4. That's all we're going to need to kind of ground our art. We are stamping with Old Olive ink and, also basic gray. And I'm going to be coloring in with Mango Melody and Pumpkin Pie. And I say coloring in, I'm going to share with you how I added color to my project without the alcohol blend markers. I'm using 2 stamps from the stamp set, the large floral spray and the sentiment thank you. I am going to be embellishing with some of my favorite embellishments from the new holiday mini catalog. These are called matte decorative dots. I love that you get 4 different colors. They are in graduated sizes, so tiny ones going all the way up to bigger, and they're ombre style. So we have light, medium, a little bit heavier, and more heavy, and then the dark tone. So we have lots of variety in this package of embellishments. We're going to be using those on our finished project, and also the linen thread, one of my favorites. And I'm going to try my hand at using the shimmery crystal effects to add a little bit of detailing to my project. So let's get started. I'm going to take away my card base, and I'm going to take away my Old Olive layer, and I'm going to have my basic white remain. This piece is going to be adhered atop the basic white, but not yet. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment in basic gray. I'm going to leave this designer series paper here as a guide for where I want to place my sentiment. And this one says thank you. That's one of my most used cards, is thank you, along with birthday. And I'm going to stamp in the lower right. I just want to clear that patterned paper, and to the lower right. Don't want to muff it up to start. There we go. That's all I'm going to need now. I'm not going to layer yet. I'm going to go ahead and stamp 2 of those floral sprays. So I've got a scrap of basic white. I'm going to go ahead and ink up the large floral spray that's part of the stamp set. This is a rubber stamp set cling mount, and I'm going to use basic gray, inking up, and I'm going to need 2 of these. So there's 1, and I'll do a second, and 2. Pressing firmly, there we go. And I think I am done stamping. So the next thing I'm going to do, before I crop this with the die from the die set, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of color to the flowers and leaves. I'm going to start off with my Old Olive ink pad. And I am not using blends, I'm just going to use ink straight off the ink pad, and what I did was just press my ink pad. There's a couple of ways to get a supply of ink actually. So I'm just going to press that sponge so that it hits the lid. And then I am going to take this blender pen. They're sold in packs of 3, I believe. So I'm just going to take the tip, and I can reuse the same pen over and over, just cleaning it after I've used it up. I'm going to put a little mat down so that I don't get my surface inky, and I'm going to bring in the color and add color to the leaves. And I can add additional color by going over. I wouldn't try to add it all at once. I just kind of layer it on. And I'm going to do all the leaves in this spray. And Nikki says she chose this stamp set for her mystery stamping project. So I have been a busy bee. I'm trying to hold summer hours, but I do have my team meeting coming up this Saturday. So I just sent out my email of the supplies needed for the mystery stamping. It's always a hoot seeing what the projects come up to be. And Nikki on my team says she chose this stamp set. I think it's really a nice stamp set. It's one of the pretty ones in the book, in the annual catalog, and as I say, it's because of the sentiments and the art. That's always a great stamp set, when you have lots of sentiment options you can use to make all the greeting cards that you need. Now I'm going to keep coming back in and add a little bit more ink on part of the leaves, because you get that shading. This is an awesome technique to color if you don't own all the blends. You can use just an ink pad, you could use the refill. If you can't get the ink onto the lid, there's another way to get a supply I'll share with you in just a moment. And so all I've done is add a little bit of color, and you can see as I went over, I'm going to bring it closer, I went over some of the darker areas where you might have a little bit of shadow. I just gave maybe 3 layers of color to that area of the leaf. Now when I'm done with the color, I'm going to want to brush off. By the way, we are going to want 2 for this card, so that you wouldn't be here after school till 4 o'clock. I went ahead and did 1 spray ahead of time, and that way you don't have to watch me repeat or do a rerun. Okay, so now I'm gonna take my Mango Melody and I'm gonna open up, and I said I'd share with you an alternative way to get ink off that pad. If you just take an acrylic block, press, it brings up ink right onto the block, and there's your supply of ink. And I just applied Mango Melody overall on the flowers. So just a quick brush to get those pretty summery flowers. And this is kind of like a nondescript flower. You could probably choose your favorite colors to color the flowers. You don't have to go with my pick. The pretty light orangey color just means summer to me. I like it. So, no rhyme or reason, pick your favorite. And I'm just applying a tiny bit of color overall. I'm gonna come back in just a minute with a darker shade or darker tone. So there we go. And just add a little bit of color really quick. So I'm going to bring that closer so you can see. So really light tone there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into some shadowy areas with pumpkin pie. So I'm going to go ahead and flip that open. I do have a tiny supply on the lid here, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that color. Now since I'm going from lighter to darker, no need to brush off my tip. I'm just going to pick up my color. And I'm going to kind of do towards the edges where we would have a little bit of darkening on the petals. So just a tiny bit, maybe in those dark areas where the lines are on the art. Really quick and simple. The blender pens used to be my go-to for coloring before Stampin' Up came with the Stampin' Blends, the alcohol markers. So this is a really economical way to get lots of color just off your ink pad. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do that bud entirely in pumpkin pie. It's a little bit darker. And I'm gonna do these darker bits that are on the basic gray. I'm just gonna fill them in with pumpkin pie. All right, so next I'm gonna add just a little bit of detailing to the center of the flower. I think I'm gonna put these aside. I don't wanna get ink on my hands and elbows. And I'm gonna come in with my basic gray and do a little bit of detailing in the center of the flower. So cleaning off the tip, picking up a little bit of color, and I'm just going to come in here around the center of the flower with a little bit of gray. There we go. Just a tiny bit of color. There we go. So I'm happy with that pretty little flower spray. There you go. You can see some areas where I have it a little bit darker. I'm going to crop this using the die. So I'm going to bring in my minis. So by the way, if you're wondering, when you shop, one of the things you could add to your order to get you to the level to get the dies for free is the mini. So the mini, I believe, is $60. If you already own a cutting machine, perfect. You can pick anything you want for your order to get the Sale-a-Bration item for free. You are not restricted to any particular product. You can shop from the main catalog, from the holiday catalog, shop online where there are kits and other things available that you don't see in a catalog. So now I'm ready to crop that. I'm going to put plate number 2 right over it and crank it through. And I'm just going to go ahead and there we go. Crop that. Bring my plates off. And there is my pretty die cropped with those shaded summer dies. And I think I'm ready to assemble my card. what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in the second spray, and I am going to place the first one down. It's going to be flat adhered. I'm going to bring it in onto the basic white layer with just some Tombow liquid glue. Hopefully it's cooperating with me and it's not plugged. And I'm just going to put a tiny, tiny bit of adhesive on the back, not a lot. And I'm going to position it onto the basic white layer. So I'm just using the grid lines to kind of see where I want. I know that I want my flower peeking off, but I don't want it so high up that it's going to fall off of my card. So I think I'm going to put it right around there. It's over just a tiny bit too much. Love the forgiving liquid glue. Okay, so I do not want it peeking off that basic white, so let me get my snips. I'm going to snip that off. Now I'm going to layer that small scrap of wood grain paper, just a little bit of flat adhesive as well, and it goes all the way to the base of the card. No border, just like so. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to add my second spray of flowers. This time I'm going to pop it up with dimensionals. So I'm going to put a couple dimensionals on here. See if I have them handy. I'm using the basic dimensionals. And just enough to make sure it's secure on there. Maybe one little tiny one down here towards the bottom. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and place that onto this layer. And I don't want to obstruct my sentiment here, so I'm just gonna be mindful of where I place this, right like so. And I don't want this hanging over here off that onto the wood grain, so I'm gonna snip that. So, and before I add it to my old olive layer, I'm going to add a little bit of twine to that. I love the natural twine, so I'm just going to bring this in, and let's see, I'm not going to cut yet. Let's see if I can wrap it and bring it through, and let's see, right around here. I'm just going to try and tie a bow. Not an easy thing to do when I'm on camera. Ordinarily I don't have too many issues tying a bow until you turn the camera on, and it's a little bit loose. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and snip. Now I know how much I need, and I'm going to grab a glue dot. I have one handy. I do, to help me out here. These little glue dots are the perfect extra hand you need. I'm just going to put one right down here where I'm going to want to have my bow. There we go. And then that way I'm just going to press that down, and the twine will behave itself. It won't be jumping all over the paper. Perfect. Much better. There we go. Now I'm ready to adhere it to the old olive mat, and I'm using flat adhesive as well. And you can see I just put a small line. I'm not too heavy-handed with this. I don't want to create a mess with the glue. That's just a sticky mess. There we go. And I'm gonna go ahead and press down firmly, and yikes. My last step to finish off the card is to bring back my card base. This is going to be elevated with dimensionals on the back. So dimensional covers are hard to see. I usually like to draw a line on them so I can see when I have already moved the backing. And I'm gonna weight this. It's a little bit wider base than it is up at the top. That's how I like to map my focal point. There we go. And not finished yet. I want to do a little bit of embellishing. I am going to take this shimmery crystal effects and let's see if it will cooperate with me. I stored it standing up so it wouldn't clog up. I just want to put a tiny droplet into the center of the flowers. Let's see if it'll come through for me. And I did it earlier. There we go, I think it's coming through. Just a tiny little drop. Again, just like the glue, you don't want to have it ooze out. And it might be, I can see it wanting to come out here. Let me take my handy dandy tack, make sure it's cleared in here, and see if that'll let it through. Tiniest bit, there we go. I just want to have a little bit of a glossy look right there in the center of the flower. And do it on the other one as well. And sorry, I had to reach in with my other hand and squeeze it through, force it to come out. There we go. Again, just a tiny bit. I just want a little bit of glossiness there. And I do like to store this upright. That way it doesn't clog up the tip. And one final step, I'm gonna bring in those matte decorative dots. I'm gonna go straight for the green. I think they're Old Olive. And I'm gonna use my little tool, my helper tool, and I'm gonna pick up a medium-sized dot and a couple of the smaller ones. These are, the pick a tool is so helpful for bossing these dots around. And let's see, I don't quite have space down here. I'm gonna bring it up. There we go. So there is my first thank you card. Let me just trim off my tails on my bow. Just a little tiny bit. There is a nice thank you card, very summery, with that pretty little flower from Shaded Summer, and easily cropped with those dies that you can get as your celebration gift. So there's my first thank you card. I'm gonna go ahead and set that aside. What do you think? Very simple design. I love the crumb cake card base. The colors are kind of nice and soothing. All right, let me put that one aside. Now let me go on to the second card I've got for you and share with you this card. This one says, may the good you do come back to you. It's kind of like a monotone card. I've just got the Old Olive going on. And this one features a nice little fold. I introduced it last month at our card club and everyone seemed to enjoy the fold. When you open it up, we've got our nice little white area to write our message or our sentiment. We have a little panel of the Old Olive. This is the DSP stack with the little plaid pattern that I love. And again, I've got that In Good Taste wood grain paper going on in the background. So let me show you what I used to create this card, and we'll get that one going in just a second. And let's see, I'm going to move out what I don't need. And come in with my supplies for my second card. Okay, so this one, the orientation is going differently. When I cut the paper, I still cut it in half, but this time I cut it longwise. It's only 4 1/4 across, 11 inches tall. I need also a basic white layer that's 5 1/4 by 4. This is going to go on the inside of the card. And I need a panel that's 1 1/4 by 4. This is going to be adhered to the right side of the card on the inside. On the outside, I've got some layers going on. I need a crumb cake layer that's 4 inches by 3 1/4. I need that wood grain paper that's 4 inches by 3. The DSP layer is 3 inches by 3 inches, and I chose this side, this geometric side. You could choose the one with the dotted lines, whichever you like. And I need a scrap, a basic white to stamp on. This is the basic white that gets layered onto this DSP. So this measures 2 3/4 by 2 3/4. And then I need a scrap of old olive that's about 3 inches wide. We're gonna trim it down to about 3/4 of an inch tall. So those are my layers that I've got going on for the card. Let me share with you how I created that fun fold. So I'm gonna need my paper trimmer. Let me bring that in. And I'm gonna do some scoring. I'm not going to cut. I've already cut my card base. I'm gonna go ahead and push my cutting blade out of the way, and I need to score right down the middle of 11, which would be 5 1/2. Score line with the lighter gray, and then I'm gonna want a score line at the far right, 1 1/4 inches from the edge of the paper. So I'm gonna bring it over to the right side of my trimmer. There's the 1 1/4. So I'm gonna go ahead and score that down. And voila, our scoring is done. I'm gonna fold this up so you can see how it's gonna come together. Got a lot of stuff going on my desktop. So I'm gonna fold that on the score. Use my bone folder to burnish. And then on that score line that is 1 1/4 from the right, I'm gonna flip it opposite direction, fold back. And that's gonna allow the inside layer to peek through. We're gonna add that pretty pattern, right like so. But before I adhere that on there, I'm gonna do a little bit of stamping inside. We're gonna add some art. This time we're using the shorter floral spray. This one just has one main flower, but it's monochromatic, so I'm going to bring in just my old olive. And I'm gonna ink up. Brush this aside, and I'm going to stamp so that it's peeking out from that 1 1/4 inch pattern paper. And now I'm ready to adhere this. I'm going to use flat adhesive. So the cool thing about this design is you could pick any color. It doesn't have to be old olive. It would look pretty in Night of Navy or in a softer petal pink. There we go. This panel goes on the inside, so I'm going to go ahead and adhere that now. I'm going to have an equal border all the way around, and it's flat adhered. If I was going to stamp a sentiment, I would probably stamp before I glue it down, just in case. Do the stamping first before you glue down. That way if you mess up, you still have the option to flip it over and give it another try. So I'm gonna have about 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. There we go. All right, I'm gonna create some of the layers on the outside as well. I'm going to bring in my crumb cake, and I'm going to adhere that wood grain right atop of the crumb cake. Again, flat adhesive. This card can get too bulky, so we just want to have minimal dimension added. Otherwise, it's going to be too thick, too puffy for the US mail. And I'm going to have about 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. I'm going to flip that over and go ahead and burnish it down so I get a nice contact on that adhesive. I like to flip it over that way, just in case any sticky oozes out, I'm not getting my bone folder all sticky. Now I'm going to go ahead and add this to the outside of the card. I'm going to layer it here. Again, flat adhesive, and I'm going to want, and I'm looking at the wood grain. I think I want to have the lighter exposed a little bit more than the darker. And again, about 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. Flip it over, burnish that down. And now I'm going to secure that outside flap down. So again, flat adhesive. And you'll notice I avoid going all the way to the edge of the paper with the glue. Secure that down. All right, so now before I go any further, I'm going to go ahead and do my stamping. I'm going to put that aside for now. I am going to stamp on my measured basic white. This is 2 3/4, and I'm also going to do a second layer that's going to be die cut. So still in Old Olive, monochromatic, and I'm going to do it kind of at an angle, pressing down firmly. And then I'm going to do a second image that I'm going to die cut, and then it's going to be layered to peek off of the focal point. So there we go. And I think I'm done with the Old Olive. I am going to bring in the die from the set, and I need my mini back. And this sandwich is the platform, number 1. Number 2 is a cutting plate. Then our paper and the die. And let's see if I can get that right in position. Now, if it's not behaving and it's kind of wiggling around, you can always take a piece of washi tape and hold it in place. I'm going to add my second number 2 cutting pad and crank it through. Notice how I don't sandwich it nice and even. It works out better to stagger the pads. The cutting just goes so much more smoothly. And I'm done with my cutting plates and the mini. Let's see. Right, like so. Trying to keep control of all of this. And this now is going to be adhered onto my pattern paper, flat adhesive. Flip that over, and I'm going to have, again, about a 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. And it's going to go right atop our card base, and I'm going to kind of center it on this folded panel. It's flat adhesive again. I think this is a really nice folded template, and I always like it a little bit wider down at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and push up. There we go. It allows so many layers of color and pattern to kind of peek through. Now, finally, I'm going to add my top layer, and even though it's the top layer, I'm still going to put it down with flat adhesive. You can see I had a smudge on the back piece of my paper. It's going to be positioned so that it kind of hangs right off, and like so. And my sentiment I'm using this time, it's going to be stamped on Old Olive. I am going to use early espresso ink so that it really pops through. And this sentiment says, "May the good you do come back to you." And I'm going to be creating the little flag or the banner. So I'm going to stamp it pretty close to the top of this paper. I'm going to try and position it so I can see a little bit better. Right through here. And let's see, right like so. I'm going to press down firmly. And you know what, I think I'm going to do a second one. I think I kind of moved it a little bit. That M is a little bit smudgy, so I'm going to try it again. I always like to flip the paper over. And let me try it again so that I don't muck up that M. Better. Okay, so now I need to trim this down. I'm done with my ink. I'm going to push that aside. And I am going to bring in the paper trimmer and trim this down to about 3/4 of an inch. I do need my cutting blade. So I'm going to push it up here, make sure that all of my lettering comes through. So let's try that again. I kind of moved it over. I'm going to slice that down, and I am going to add a little forked edge to the banner, and I'm using my tailored punch. I'm going to flip it over, and I want that little angle right there, and I want it on the left of the sentiment. So I'm just going to balance this out so it's centered, just like so. Now I've got a nice little flag. And then finally, this is what's going to be popped up with dimensionals. So I'm going to flip that over, put a couple of dimensionals on the back. Right here. And I'm going to place it on my focal point. I'm going to bring it over all the way to the edge so that it's aligned with that fold. And I have about 1/8 of an inch of white peeking through. And pressing down. And then one last thing, I'm going to add a little linen thread bow. And I'm going to double it up. So I'm going to take probably, I don't know, maybe 10 inches length, but I'm going to double it to make it a little bit bulkier, a little bit heavier. And I'm going to just go ahead and tie a bow, 2 rabbit ears, flip that over, and I'm going to put it in place with a glue dot right around so, right through here, and press that in position. I'm ready to trim up the ends of the bow now. I don't want them flying off the card too much. I don't want them too long. Just like so. All right, there is my second shaded summer card. So we created 2. One is a nice friendship card. One is a thank you card. Kind of monochromatic. I still have the same color tones going on with the browns and the craft and the old olive. Thank you, Barbara. She says she loves the monochromatic look. I do too. So let me share with you a non-monochromatic card with shaded summer. The dies that you get as part of the celebration, they also include flowers that are not part of the stamp set. So on this set of dies, you've got larger solid flowers that you can cut, and then the overlay, the detailed overlay that you can cut. And you've got both 2 kinds of flowers, and you have some leaves going on as well. And so let me share with you what I've created with just the dies from the stamp set. I brought in this pretty card. You can see I use those 2 types of flowers, and what I'm using is the glimmer paper, the rainbow glimmer paper. And I cut not only the glimmer intricate layer, but I also cut the background images for each of the flowers and also the leaves, and I placed it right behind the glimmer paper. to kind of make them pop. So this is Mango Melody. This is, let's see, it's not Magenta Madness. It is the new in color, the Positively Pink. And I've got Granny Apple Green going on. The card base is Early Espresso with that Early Espresso suede ribbon. This one's a birthday card, and I added the gilded gems to this one as well. So minimal stamping on this one, more die cutting, but now we have our happy birthday card as well. So all 3 cards created with the Shaded Summer. Let's see if I can pull everything into place for you. There you go. There are our stamp set and the dies, and the 3 cards we created, or the 2 cards we created, and a bonus card as well. So post a comment whether you're watching live or whether you're watching on the replay. What do you like better? Do you like the one with a little bit of color? Do you like the monochromatic card? Or do you like that one with a little sparkle? And the die cuts, the happy birthday. I think all 3 are cards that I will use. They're cards that I need. And I really enjoyed using that pretty Shaded Summer stamp set and my freebie Sale-a-Bration item. So there you go. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any comments or questions, please post them. I do check them following the video, and I try to respond if you do have a question. Again, I appreciate you popping in, whether you're new or whether you're returning. You can always skip over to the YouTube channel as well for just the how-to video. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great afternoon.